I didn't plan to notice anything that night. I was tired, distracted, and only thinking about getting home before the rain got worse. The parking lot was almost empty, the kind of place where headlights blur against wet asphalt and every sound echoes longer than it should. That's when I heard the shouting. At first, I told myself it was none of my business. Couples argue. Voices get raised. People say things they don't mean. That's what I wanted to believe as I slowed my steps, keys already in my hand. But then I heard her voice. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was scared. I stopped walking. From where I stood, I could see them clearly under one of the flickering parking lot lights. A man in an expensive coat, clean shoes, confident posture. And a woman standing a few feet away from him, soaked from the rain, arms close to her body, like she was trying to make herself smaller. He was yelling. She wasn't saying much at all. I remember thinking how out of place they looked. This wasn't some dark alley or run-down street. This was a clean, well-lit parking lot, outside a busy building. The kind of place where things like this weren't supposed to happen. The man stepped closer to her. She backed away. That's when my stomach tightened. I looked around instinctively, expecting someone else to notice. Another car pulling in. A door opening. Anything. But the lot stayed quiet, the rain filling the silence between his words. He said something I couldn't hear clearly, but the tone was sharp, final. The kind of voice people use when they believe they're in control. She shook her head. And then it happened. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. That almost made it worse. He shoved her hard enough that she stumbled, her foot slipping on the wet ground. She barely caught herself before falling. I felt frozen. There's a moment in situations like that where your brain races through excuses. Maybe I misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe someone else will step in. But then he kicked her. Not full force. Not to seriously injure her. Just enough to hurt. Just enough to intimidate. And that's when I knew. This wasn't an argument. This was someone who thought he could do whatever he wanted. I took a step forward, without really thinking about it. My heart was pounding, my mind running through every possible outcome. I wasn't a hero. I wasn't trained. I was just someone who happened to be there. Before I could say anything, I noticed movement near one of the parked vehicles. At first, I thought it was another person approaching. But then, I saw the dog. A large German shepherd stepped into the light, rain beating on its thick coat. Calm, focused, alert. It wasn't barking or pulling. It was standing perfectly still, eyes locked on the man. And then I saw the handler. He didn't rush in, he didn't shout, he didn't posture. He simply stood there, hand resting lightly on the leash, watching. Something about his presence changed the atmosphere immediately. The man noticed too. He turned, clearly annoyed at first, ready to snap at whoever had decided to interfere. But his expression shifted the moment he saw the dog. The shouting stopped. The handler spoke calmly, his voice steady and low. I couldn't hear every word, but the tone was unmistakable. Not threatening, not aggressive, just certain. The man scoffed, puffing himself up, clearly trying to reassert control. He gestured dismissively, like this was all a misunderstanding. The woman hadn't moved. She stood frozen, eyes darting between the man and the newcomer, like she wasn't sure which outcome scared her more. The handler took one step closer. That's when I noticed something else. His posture, his awareness, the way he positioned himself, not directly confrontational, but not backing down either. I'd seen that kind of body language before, though I couldn't immediately place where. The German Shepherd shifted slightly, muscles tensing, but still silent. The man tried to laugh it off. Bad move. The handler finally raised his voice, just enough to be heard clearly over the rain. He told the man to step away from the woman. Not asked, told. For a split second, it looked like the man might refuse. His jaw tightened, his fists clenched. Pride, battling instinct. Then his eyes flicked back to the dog. The silence stretched. Slowly, reluctantly, he stepped back. The woman let out a shaky breath, like she'd been holding it for far too long. I realized then that the handler hadn't touched the man. The dog hadn't moved. Nothing violent had happened. And yet, the power dynamic had completely flicked. The handler turned slightly toward the woman and spoke to her gently. I couldn't hear what he said, but I saw her nod. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. The man tried one last attempt to regain control, muttering something under his breath. That was when the handler finally looked him directly in the eye. "I wouldn't do that," he said quietly. That was it. No threats, no shouting, no escalation. And somehow, it was more effective than anything else could have been. The man backed away fully now, hands raised in frustration, face flushed with embarrassment and anger. He stormed off toward his car, throwing one last look over his shoulder like he wanted to say something, but didn't. The handler waited until the car pulled out of the lot before turning back to the woman. Only then did I notice the small details. The subtle military-style tattoo on his wrist. The disciplined stillness. The way the dog never stopped scanning the surroundings. It clicked. This wasn't just someone walking their dog. This was someone who had spent a lifetime learning how to control dangerous situations without losing control himself. The rain began to ease. The handler asked the woman if she was hurt. She shook her head, tears mixing with rain on her face. He offered to stay with her until help arrived, or until she felt safe leaving. She hesitated, then nodded. I stayed where I was, still unsure whether to approach or keep my distance. Part of me wanted to disappear. Another part knew I'd just witnessed something important. The handler glanced in my direction briefly. Not suspicious, not annoyed, just aware. That look alone told me he knew I was there the whole time, and for reasons I still can't fully explain, I felt relieved. Because that night, justice didn't arrive with sirens or flashing lights. It arrived quietly, on four paws, with calm eyes and steady hands. And the story wasn't over yet. The woman sat on the edge of the concrete barrier, arms wrapped around herself, staring at the ground like she wasn't sure it was solid anymore. The handler stayed a respectful distance away, giving her space, but never turning his back. The German Shepherd lay down beside him, alert but calm, ears moving slightly at every distant sound. No one rushed her. No one demanded explanations. That silence mattered more than words. After a few minutes, she spoke. Her voice was quiet, almost apologetic, like she was afraid of taking up space. She said this wasn't the first time. The handler nodded slowly, not surprised. People who live through these moments often think they're invisible, but patterns are easy to recognize if you've seen enough of them. She explained how things always happened in public places, how he knew exactly where the line was. Never enough to leave marks that couldn't be explained away. Never enough to draw attention. Just enough to remind her who he thought was in control. She laughed once, bitterly, and said he always told her no one would believe her anyway. The handler didn't interrupt, didn't correct her, didn't argue. When she finished, he asked one simple question. "Do you want to leave tonight?" She hesitated. That hesitation said everything. It's easy, from the outside, to wonder why someone doesn't just walk away. It's harder to understand how fear rewires logic, how confidence erodes slowly until even simple decisions feel impossible. She finally nodded. The handler told her he could stay while she called someone she trusted. Or he could call for help if she wanted. Or if she preferred, he could just walk her to her car and make sure she got out safely. He gave options, not orders. She chose the call. As she spoke quietly into her phone, I noticed how her hands were shaking less now. Her breathing steadied. Just knowing someone was there, someone who wasn't afraid, had shifted something. The German Shepherd stood up when a car passed nearby, placing itself slightly between her and the road. Not aggressively, just instinctively. I remember thinking how strange it was that an animal understood what humans sometimes refuse to see. When the call ended, she looked up for the first time and managed a small smile. Someone was on their way. The handler nodded and said he'd wait. They talked a little while longer, not about the incident, about ordinary things. The weather, the dog's training, neutral ground, things that reminded her the world was still normal beyond that moment. Eventually, headlights appeared at the far end of the lot. Relief washed over her face. Before leaving, she turned to the handler and thanked him. Not dramatically, not emotionally, just sincerely. He told her she didn't owe him anything, then added something I won't forget. Sometimes all it takes is one person noticing. She left. The handler clipped the leash more securely and turned back toward his vehicle. I realized then that I hadn't moved in a long time. He caught my eye again and gave a small nod, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I considered saying something, thanking him, asking questions. But something told me it wasn't necessary. Some people don't step in for recognition. As he walked away, I finally noticed the subtle insignia on his jacket. Not obvious, not flashy, but enough to confirm what I'd suspected earlier. This wasn't just confidence. This was experience. Later that night, long after the rain stopped, I couldn't stop replaying the scene in my head. Not the violence, but the moment it ended. How quickly power shifted when someone refused to be intimidated. We grow up believing justice is loud, that it arrives with authority and force. But sometimes it arrives quietly, prepared, patient, unavoidable. I don't know what happened to the man after that. Maybe he went home angry, maybe embarrassed, maybe more careful. I don't know what happened to the woman either. I hope she stayed safe. I hope that night marked the beginning of something better. What I do know is this. He thought he was untouchable because no one had ever challenged him. He mistook silence for permission. He confused fear with weakness. And for once, he was wrong. That night didn't end with sirens or arrests. No one cheered. No one filmed it. It didn't go viral. But something important happened anyway. Someone who believed he could act without consequences learned that he was being watched. Someone who believed she was alone learned she wasn't. And I learned something too. that doing nothing is a choice, and noticing is the first step toward change. Some stories don't need names. Some moments don't need proof. They just need to be remembered. Because somewhere out there, in another quiet place, someone is watching from the shadows. And this time, they won't look away.